Okay, there we go. I started it. Okay, everybody, we are recording due to a request from our director. So this will be on the website eventually. Turn it back to you, Don.
Sure. Welcome to Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us. If you're here for the GovBiz Exchange, then you are in the right place. If you are not here for the GovBiz Exchange, well, take it as a happy accident because you're about to get a great workshop here. My name is Don Zaveski. I'm with the Northeast Ohio branch of the Ohio Apex Accelerator program, and we are here with the entire team today from Northeastern Ohio, including Jane Stewart and John Woodard. And John's going to be presenting an overview workshop today on breaking down request for proposals, RFPs. And we're really very, very fortunate to have John do this for us. John comes straight out of industry, straight out of being in your shoes as working in the government contracting industry, and he's done many of these kind of things in his professional past, and now continues to do so as an Apex Accelerator. So just very, very quickly, we'll get into the meat and potatoes of this in a second, but just a couple things. Housekeeping. A copy of the slides will be made available to you at the conclusion of the presentation. We usually try to post that sometime today. If we don't get to it today, we'll get to it early next week. The session is being recorded. That will include the discussion at the end, just to make you cognizant of that. So that will be available through our website. And let's see, I always kind of forget something or other, but feel free to post any questions you have in the chat. We will try to get to those during the presentation if that makes sense. If it's kind of a longer discussion idea, then we will probably reserve that to the end of the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we really kind of open this up to discussion. Of course, we're kind of looking to discuss the topic at hand, but feel free to bring anything to the table in terms of government contracting that you would like to discuss, and we can go from there. So yeah, I think that's about it. Am I forgetting anything, Jane, Woody?
I think you've covered it all.
Okay, great.
One small item, Don.
Yes. Yeah. Did want to mention real briefly that this is a training workshop that is centered on government contracting, and of course we try to keep that topic the focus of the discussion and what we're covering. So we'd appreciate it if we kind of stay within that lane. We have other activities, other things that the Apex Accelerator program offers in terms of business networking and those sorts of activities. Those are generally different events that are purely organized and focused on business networking opportunities. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, like I said, keep your eyes and ears open for when we conduct those events. Today's event is purely structured on education and sort of hoping to give you the skills you need to understand how to analyze an RFP. So having said that, Mr. Woodard, the floor is yours, the show is yours, and I will stand by and monitor the chat for any questions as we proceed forward.
That sounds great. Hello and good morning, everybody. I also go by the nickname Woody because I do like to keep things kind of informal. I am a Navy veteran, 10 years with U.S. Navy Seabees, and I was a class instructor for about 8 of those years. So I do tend to speak loudly, which we don't have to worry too much about Zoom, but it does pop up in the mic every once in a while when I'm answering questions. So I'm not mad about the questions. I'm just naturally, after all these years, keep projecting my voice, which is why I go through microphones. But anyhow, today's topic is breaking down the request for proposals, RFPs. And the reason I chose to present this today is because it seems to be the season and everybody's asking me the same question. So we're going to try and knock this out and help everybody out here with this presentation today. So I'm going to share my big screen. Everybody should be seeing the title slide, GovBiz Exchange, breaking down the request for proposals. If you're not, please say something now so I don't go into this like, and 10 minutes later, everybody's like, oh, we don't see the slides.
Looks good. Looks good, Woody.
I won't say who did that, but you know, you can tell by the laugh.
Yeah.
It looks
So-
awesome. Professional, wonderful.
So today's presentation is brought by you, the Ohio Apex Accelerator, which is part of the supported by Department of Development for Ohio, Ohio University, which is a host university, and of course the National Apex Accelerators organization. So, a couple of definitions. A request for proposal is simply a document that's being put out there by an entity, an organization, looking for someone to do a job. And it's as simple as that. These are critical tools and are used by a lot of organizations, particularly government organizations, to locate potential vendors, suppliers, or manufacturers to fulfill a need. Here's some key ideas I want you to know about a proposal. And like I just said, it is a project announcement that's posted by a publicly, but there is one that can be posted privately. We'll get to that in a little bit. And what it does is it tells you that they're looking for a bid by a contractor and they set the parameters for it. The RFP will define the project and tell you who issued the project. And if it's a government agency, they're required to let you know who else is interested in bidding on the project. They'll have like a bid list because it can't be held privately if it's spent, public dollars are spent on it. RFPs are most commonly used by the government agencies, cities, counties, townships, states, and federal government. And quite a few colleges use them as well. And the last line there kind of leads to another slide is, if they don't use RFPs, it's a very informal process and it's not very structured. There's a lot of confusion and a lot of people upset that they didn't get a project that leads to questions of transparencies. So RFPs help keep a structure in there, keep everything transparent so everybody sees what's going on and the bidding process is kept fair. So this is what that last line was leading into. Why do organizations use RFPs? We just talked about that. Standardizing the procurement process. It puts it across the board. Everybody's on the same playing field. It's easier to evaluate the vendors, the information, and the bids that are being offered. And that's one thing I want to touch on. When you see a request for a proposal, an RFP, some people call it a proposal response. Some people call it a bid proposal. But what you're really doing is you're putting in your best piece of work, saying this is how much you'll charge to do that project. So in a way, it's like a bid at an auction house. The difference is instead of going up the scale, the prices are going down the scale because the government's now looking for the best deal they can get at a lower price. And that's another thing I want to bring up here is a lot of people assume that just because they put the lowest price into a bid and submit that to a government agency or an organization, that they're going to win that RFP and get the project. That's no longer true. They've refined the rules. So now the agencies are allowed to look for the best deal at the dollar, no longer just the lowest bid price. And we just talked about this, it ensures competitive pricing. we share the slide deck, so I'm not going to read all this to you guys. I put you to sleep, but I put me to sleep. But one thing I want you to realize is when they put out an RFP, they've had a couple, like in engineering. I used to work for an engineering firm. When we put out an RFP for one of our cities that we managed, they had engineers actually do some market research to see what they expect the pricing to be. And if the pricing doesn't fall within the range that the engineers determine, they pull back the RFP, they look at it, they reevaluate, and they might reissue it, or they might just scrap the project. But there is a pricing guide that they are evaluating the bids as they come in. RFPs ensure vendor accountability. And I have a sample RFP we're going to go through literally section by section. At the end of it, you're going to see that they actually have the legal phrases in there that you will adhere to the terms that are agreed to by the contract based upon this RFP. And everybody has to have the same terms. So again, it keeps it to be a level playing field, fair competition, but it also allows the cities, the municipalities, the government agencies to hold a vendor's feet to the fire if they don't do their job or they don't fulfill the contract properly. And I've seen that happen. In fact, I know one situation where one of my clients has just taken over a project where the Army brought him on board because the previous vendor had to refund $75,000 back to the U.S. Army because they didn't do the job right. So these RFPs, you got to pay attention to them. And there's the paragraph that talks about all that. RFPs, when you successfully bid on one and you win it, you are now have the opportunity to build a relationship with the organization that put out the RFP. And the reason you want to consider this an investment in a relationship is because there is such a thing as releasing RFPs to a private list of vendors. That happens more on the commercial side of the house. But occasionally, if it's low enough, a government agency can request certain vendors to bid on it or take a look at it. In the state of Ohio, anything under $50,000 does not, and I repeat, does not have to go out to a public bid. The city or the agency can put it out to a private bid or just award that contract to a company. If it's over $50,000 in the state of Ohio, then it has to go out to public bid. So if you are properly fulfilling your contracts and you get a good reputation and have a good relationship with these local agencies or municipalities, if they have something like $45,000, they just might pick up the phone and say, hey, we're putting together a small list to bid on this one project. It should be below $50,000. So you already get a little bit of a budget idea that you don't normally get, that you have to keep your bid under $45,000 or under $50,000. And it's going to be a shortlisted RFP. So that's why you want to take care of it. Make sure you're building a long-term relationship on these projects. And there's the more, I guess, legalese way of saying what I just said. So now we're going to get into there are types of RFPs, okay? Open versus closed. Open RFPs are the ones that get publicly advertised, while closed are sent to a pre-selected list of vendors. I just talked about that. That goes back to that long-term relationship. You start doing good work on RFPs, even as a subcontractor. If you might not be the prime, but if you're a subcontractor who it becomes the face of the project because you or your staff are in there fulfilling the contract for the prime, the city staff gets to know you and they will tip you off. When I worked for Chagrin Valley Engineering and Davie Resource Group, I had great relationships with several cities, and they'd say, hey, Woody, do you think you can keep this under $50,000 if we stretched out over, say, 3 years and we you know, what do you think? I was like, well, we could do it for 45,000 for 3 years. And they, oh, great, give us a proposal, and we'll take that to council. But that came off of one big project we did, and it worked out really well. So if you can get yourself in that cycle with a good reputation, you'll be on the pre-selected list, and you want to be there because it makes your life a lot easier. Public versus private RFPs. Now, this is kind of weird because we're talking open and closed, but this actually is referring to a public RFP is one that's put out by a government organization. Private RFPs are generally issued by non-government organizations, which could be like a religious group. The Catholic cemeteries up in Cleveland were looking for a GPS company. GIS is Geographic Information Systems, and we all know what GPS is, because they wanted to build a little module where you would download an app into your phone, and then you could put the grave number for your deceased relative, and it would navigate you to that grave site in these massive cemeteries. They're not a government organization. They put out the RFP through churches and the lay people, and Chagrin Valley Engineering took a look at it and decided it wasn't quite what we wanted to do, so we passed on it. But that's how we found out, because one of our engineers was on the advisory board for the cemetery, and they asked them to ask us if we'd take a look at it. Product versus service RFPs. This is something where a product is they're looking for something to buy, something that's manufactured. Whereas a service RFP would be like cleaning services, maybe managing a project, an actual service. Sometimes it's just software development. I've worked on a couple of those. And then we have the single step versus multi-step. And what a lot of people don't realize is if you're going for a big project, like anything under $50,000, generally a single step. You submit the RFP, it goes through a committee, you're approved, you start work. Multi-step RFPs mean that goes to a committee, they select a short list of vendors. The vendors then come in and give a presentation about how they would do the job, why they're the best company to hire, and what makes them unique. Think about those business capability statements, people. That's where this comes in handy, because you need to be short and to the point. You're generally only given 10, 15 minutes to do the presentation. And that's the second step. And then they go back through another review. That would be the third step. The final step would be, you might come in front of the finance person, the mayor, and the city engineer if you're an engineering firm, and do one more presentation. And this is usually the top three. And then those three make the final decision. A multi-step RFP can take a couple months before you find out who's actually going to be getting the job. And you'll go through several rounds of interviews, submissions. And by the way, that's all done on your dime. The cities and government agencies do not cover your costs for submitting RFPs. I want to put that out there too, because I had that question asked of me a couple weeks ago, and someone was very upset that he wasn't going to get reimbursed and all the time he put on the RFP, because he didn't get the RFP, the project, therefore he didn't get paid, and he was kind of upset about that. But that's the way it is. If you submit, you cover the cost of the submission.
What do you
So
think?
here's the basic parts of an RFP. We have a question, Don?
Yeah, if I could. The question is, if the government is required to post a bid list, does that also include the vendor bid pricing?
No.
Or the bid are the bid prices private?
You will get a list of people who are interested in the project, especially they have what they call pre-bid meetings, sometimes that are required. And here's another little tip for you. When you read through the RFP, if it says a pre-bid meeting is required, you have to go to the meeting, you sign into the meeting, and then you get a document when you come out that shows that you were there. But what happens is when you submit, everybody who submits, they go right to that list. If your name or your company's name is not on that list for the pre-bid meeting, you're immediately set aside and disqualified. So that's where you can pick up a list of names of the vendors who are interested in the project, because they will release that pre-bid list too. Now, pricing wise, you are not privy to any of the prices that are put into submission until the project is awarded and someone wins it. Then it becomes public information. Up until that point, the city owns all the information and they can keep it private because they're trying to keep the competitive bidding fair. Once the winning bid is accepted, that price is then put in the city records and you can dig it out of the city records if you so desire. And you can also ask for a debrief on the RFP. Why didn't I win the RFP? What can you go over this with me and show me where we made our mistake? And they'll go over, they'll sit down with you and they'll go through the RFP, they'll debrief you and say, we were looking for this, but you talked about that, and your pricing was too high. And then that's when you can find out the actual numbers for the winning bid. So
Can I interject?
sure.
Pre-bid meetings and bidders lists, those are generally only part of a construction contract or a janitorial contract. The type of contract that you actually have to visit the site in order to prepare your offer. If you're bidding on products, that's not going to be, that's just not part of the process.
Right.
That's all I wanted to say.
No, you're absolutely right. And good point. I worked a lot in that area, so it just became second nature to me, expected to go to those. But Jane is right, that's part of the construction field and we have to visit the site. But even if you submit online, you can request a list of people who are also interested in the project, but you don't get any other information, just the name, the company name, and maybe an email. Okay, so let's go back. We got another question, Don, or we good?
No, I think that takes care of it.
All right. So back here. First part of an RFP, project overview. And this just gives you an idea what the project is and what the objectives of the whole process is for the organization. Scope of work. What are they expecting you to do? They generally write out, this is the task we need. This is what we need to, if it's a multi-step task, they're going to give you the milestones. And finally, at the end of it, these are the results we expect to have delivered to us, which is why they're called deliverables, at the end of this project. Timeline. They're going to give you a start date and when they expect the project to end. And then you break it down to phases and you talk to the city about deadlines and put all that in your project approach. Qualification criteria. Why are you qualified to work for us? It's that simple. Budget. This is you don't always get a budget, okay? Generally, the budget might be on the other side of the people putting the RFP out, and that's how they determine whether or not their expectations are on target. Because if everybody comes into the budget amount somewhere within a couple $1,000s, they're pretty happy with what they've got. If the budget amount, if all the projects come in too low or too high, they'll probably put a hold on bid submissions while they review the project and see why things are seem to be a little skewed. So budgets, 9 times out of 10, you will not be aware of their budget because you're setting the budget when you submit your bid. Because the budget becomes, if I can do this project for $100,000, that's the project budget. If you say $75,000, that's the project budget. And then submission guidelines. These are important. You need to follow the submission guidelines. Where does it go? How do you submit it? What's the format? Deviate from anything they put forth in those guidelines or formatting, the formatting guidelines, you are going to be disqualified. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. And then finally, the evaluation criteria. They give you some idea of how they're going to evaluate all the proposals coming into them. And that's the basic overview of the RFPs. The question is, where do you find them? You can find them at the federal level through SAM.gov. You can find them at the academia level in the States. Usually universities have some form of procurement system. And I see my one word for academia got stuck over the state. I don't know how that happened, but Ohio procurement is an example of the state system, which is similar to the federal government, SAM. And each one of these entities has RFPs put out there for you. You just have to find a website like the Inter-University Council of Ohio Purchasing Group. They have RFPs. You have Ohio Buys, Ohio Procurement. You go to supplier list and they have it. And we're going to cover that here next, because this is the path of an RFP search for SAM.gov. You put your search words in, you find it, and you get, like in the red box there is the name of the project. It's a contract. If you go over here, you have the contract opportunity, so you know that this is some form of contract, an RFP. You click on this, or you can click here, and it's going to take you to this long list. And then down at the bottom is the attachments and links table, which is actually the RFP that you can download. You can download it from here. I just blew it up here so you can see it. So, you know, where it says RFQ, that's a request for qualifications, unfortunately. That's the PDF. And you can download that, and that's how you can find RFPs and download them from SAM.gov.
What do you got? A couple questions here real quick.
Okay.
The first one is, how do you know where to look for RFP opportunities within each state?
You have to locate the state procurement system. And that's usually you can do a keyword search on Google or Microsoft Edge, I think they call it now, where you can say Pennsylvania procurement system. And then you select from whatever pops up in the search bar, and you can find it that way. You can reach out to any state agency, and they should be able to tell you where to locate the state procurement system.
And then the other question here, is there a standard format for submitting bids? And this is kind of a common thing that we encounter, right? Standard format for submitting bids. The other aspect of that question is there a template?
Unfortunately, no. Your format when you submit the bid, when you create the bid, is determined by the person or the organization that put out the bid. There are templates you can download if you want to create an RFP and put it out there. They have those. But I've seen bids, they limit the bid to 4 pages, 11-point type, single space or double space, one-sided. I've worked on projects where we were restricted to 60 pages for all of our information. And we were told we could use a minimum of 12-point type with 1-inch margins all the way around. I mean, it really depends upon the organization putting out and what they're trying to do. If they're trying to weed out people who don't pay attention to details, they'll have some really strict guidelines on how to submit and how to format the final product that you're going to give them. And if you deviate from it, you just get set to one side.
This is Margaret. I'm the one that asked that question. So it doesn't, you don't have to have a lot of fluff in these.
Oh no, you don't want fluff.
Okay, so it's mainly just what they need to have delivered,
Right.
your cost, and that's it. It's not, like the history of your company and, all this wordy
Here,
kind of stuff.
right. And because what happened is a couple of things happened here over the course of RFP's history. Is the cities started spending a lot of money on copying large RFPs that they realized they were wasting time, because Most of them just flipped over. They skipped the company history and flipped right over to the technical approach or the cost sheet. How much is this bid worth? You know, what's their final number? And if they like the final number, then they'll go back and look at the project approach. When I was working for Davie Resource Group, the marketing department had a boilerplate that we were supposed to put in every response to an RFP about the company. It had pictures, it had the company history from way back when the company was founded by Davie, all the way up to where it split and became Davie Tree with a subsidiary company for Davie Resource Group. We're talking 4 or 5 pages. And a lot of the RFPs I was responding to said, we want 1 page max for your company history, or just 2 paragraphs and no photographs. Because they don't want to wade through the fluff. They want to get to what you're going to do for them, how you're the best return on investment, and what the price is. So my recommendation is quite simple: is as you build up your library of material, as you respond to these, you keep a couple boilerplates, which is stuff that you just grab and stick in there. And you have a boilerplate for 2 paragraphs. You have a boilerplate for a page about your company. And that's it. You don't go any farther. If you want to put your capability statement in there, or you want to put more company history in there, you put it in at the end of the RFP in what they call the appendices, because those generally don't count against your page limit. But the problem there is if you have too many appendices talking about your company, it's fairly obvious that you're trying to, you know, do the sales pitch at the back end. But what you can do is take a business capability statement and make that Appendix A. And at the end of your little history inside the RFP response, you can say, see Appendix A for more information. And then just keep on going with your proposal writing. That way, you respond to the request for some company history. You don't lose too much valuable real estate with the pages. And you can get that capability statement with a full talk about what you can and can't, you know, what you're good at the back end of Appendix A.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. No problem.
Quick question here. Do you offer assistance with preparing a company's first bid?
We are not allowed to write it for you, but we are more than happy to meet you and support you by taking you through, having you read through the document and offering suggestions. But we can't actually do the actual writing. We can make suggestions for you on how to make it better, what you might want to include or drop out.
I'd also interject in there that you know, the best way to learn this is more in a classroom style interaction, right?
Yes.
In other words, you know, if you just came across the solicitation on Friday and it's due next Tuesday, typically we don't have the capacity to be able to work under a tight deadline with a solicitation being due. So in other words, if you can actually locate a solicitation that's indicative of your market and then go through that more in a rehearsal or practice style of support, like I said, in a classroom type of approach, then you're going to be much better served. You're going to have the knowledge that you're trying to gain in order to understand how to respond. So much better to approach it that way, to practice first before going ahead and responding. Let's see here. Another good question here. How do I find a previous RFP?
You have to go to the archive page if they're keeping an archive of them. You could request that they share the RFP list from the previous year if they're a public entity. Because generally what they'll do is they'll show you when you go, they'll show you what's been awarded, and they'll keep that up for some time, and you can just go into the award thing and pull it down that way. If you want to see something that's a couple years prior, you have to go to the department that issued the RFP and request to see it because they have to keep it on record for a while. That's the public domain. The commercial private domain, they don't have to do anything like that. But Don had a very good point, and that's one of the reasons. That's one of the ways I learned how to respond to an RFP at Davie. I just grabbed a couple sample ones and sat down, wrote out how I would normally do it. Then I got together with some of the other business developers and said, "Does this make sense?" So it's a great way to build up your boilerplate library and get in the habit of thinking about how to respond to an RFP.
Okay, let's see. I'm not sure I quite understand this question, so I'll read through it. But Robert, if you want to unmute yourself, please do. After getting set aside, do they give you a second chance? Not quite sure I fully understand that. Do you understand that, John?
I think I know where he's going. If you see an RFP that's for set aside, like an 8A, that's for those companies that are qualified. It just limits the people who can submit bids. Once it goes into bidding, there's no second chance because they're going to select somebody. If they don't select somebody, then this is important for any of the RFPs. Sometimes nobody gets selected and it gets reposted. That's your second chance. But if you submit for it and fail and they select somebody, there's no second chance. The only way you can get the so-called second chance is if they don't find anybody who's satisfactory to what they want.
Okay. All right. You both answered my question. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
No problem. That's why we're here.
Let's see. Can you clarify what IDIQ means?
What means?
IDIQ, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. Can you clarify what that means?
Indefinite delivery and indefinite quantity.
So if I could interject here, generally what that's referring to, not all the time, but usually what they mean by that is we know that we're going to purchase something in the future, right? So that could be oh gosh, I'm trying to come up with a good example here. I don't know. We know that we're going to have a certain number of offices renovated. Okay. Or we know that we're going to need to replace the carpeting, right, in some of our office buildings. We're not quite sure how much of that or when we're going to order it, but we know that over the course of the contract, which might be 5 years or so, okay, that we're going to place that order. Now, what you're typically are going to encounter with that is an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, right? So we don't know how much or when, but we know that we're going to do it. So typically what you do is you quote on a certain square footage or a unit price or an hourly rate, and it's going to depend on what the contract entails, or if they're ordering supplies, you may be quoting on a unit rate with shipping and all that. So you just give them a set price, and then essentially they can order task orders against that. So but it's really a case-by-case basis depending on the contract. And going back to what we were saying earlier, that's a really, really good example of why you want to rehearse this, right? Why you want to go through this when you're not under the gun, when your solicitation, when your proposal isn't due in 2 days. You want to learn those kind of things. You want to tackle those kind of subjects because it's a little bit more involved than just a quick 5-minute answer to a question during a workshop, but it is really going through an analysis of your market, what the government is asking for, and the nuances of what you provide, whether that's products or services. So you want to make sure when you're pricing those things, right, that you're being fair to yourself and you're being fair to the government, and you're pricing it in a manner that you can successfully perform. So use that use us, use our skills, what we provide here in gaining that knowledge and understanding. So again, so you're ready to go. So
one thing, and thank you, Don, because I didn't know. I learned something too here, which is awesome. One thing I want to point out to everybody, I've been through the mill on this. I've had the RFP dropped on my desk at 12 hours deadline, come up with something. I've had the 3-week window. Responding to these RFPs is not something, A, you learn overnight. B, it takes work. And it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of thinking and pre-planning. But you do get the hang of it. And boilerplates, keeping chunks of, if you do something technical, keep it like a easy to read manual on how to do it, but don't give away your company secrets. All helps you respond, but you build that library of information up over time through, like Don said, pulling down old RFPs and writing them out like you're responding to them. And you kind of get the hang of it after a while, but it does take a lot of research and some man hours. We got another one, Don? Or
yes, we do. Yes, we do. If you don't have the set aside for the contract, can you still bid on the RFP? And if let me kind of rephrase that. And if I don't say this right, please open up the mic and ask the question better. But what I think this is saying is that, let's say, for example, if the solicitation is set aside for woman-owned small business, and you do not have that designation, right? You're not eligible for that, and you don't have that certification. Can you still bid on the RFP?
No, because it's set aside specifically for that category of business. Your application or your bid proposal will be rejected immediately upon receipt.
Thank you.
No problem.
Let's see here. And I'll just kind of tag on the back of that. That does not mean that you can't subcontract to a prime, right? So the prime can go after it, must have that designation, but that doesn't mean that all subcontractors in support of that prime have to also hold that certification. So if you're, I think you understand.
You're right, Don.
Yeah.
Don makes a good point. The primes can go for it and then subcontract. Another thing that I've seen done, and it works, it's kind of skirting the boundaries of some things, is a prime might approach a subcontractor who has the certification that the prime needs for the project, make the subcontractor the project manager, kind of like a quasi prime, to bid on it, and then contract back to the prime to carry it out. But when they do that, they have to make sure that the percentages fall right, that the person who is getting the set aside credit gets the majority of the project fees and does majority of project work. And that's the tripwire that's gotten a couple companies in trouble over the years, because they've done that, or they've helped out a small business, and this is why the set asides came about. Then the prime took the business away from the company that got the contract. And that's why these set asides came about, and that's why they're so strict on them, because they're designed to help small businesses even the playing field and bring in money to keep them going, because the government does want small businesses to succeed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. Next question. Can you be debriefed before the second round? And I think this is going back to what you had said early on. And in the case, if no one is chosen and they repost.
Okay, the debriefing occurs only after the contract has been awarded. So if company, they always have a backup company. So the first selection, if they can't come to final terms with the company that they selected, they'll go back to the second company, like number 2. And if they can't win it, they just put it back out there. People can ask questions because each one of these RFPs has a question and answer session before you submit that you can ask questions. But the debriefing only occurs after the contract's been awarded, not between the rounds. Okay. And then what was the second part of that one, Don?
In the case of if no one is chosen and they repost.
Then that goes back to what you call the pre-questions. And what they do is they have a contact, you can submit questions to them, but they'll hold on to the questions for a while, and then they'll post a group of answers all at one time, and that's available to everybody. And that's why when you're doing this for a while, you don't want to really ask questions that might help your competition out. If you ask, and I learned this at Chagrin Valley Engineering, I was with a couple of the bosses. This is how I learned. And they said, we don't want to ask any questions. We want to listen to other people's questions and see what they're thinking about. What we're looking for here is maybe someone we can pick up as our small business part of this contract, and we can give them the 15% that we're going to have to give them. That's what they were looking for. And when you ask these questions, you have to be careful because you can give away your idea to somebody else in a pre-question seminar. Now, once the RFP has been put out to bid, the contracting officer or the person who's the contact cannot answer questions after the question period has been closed. Because they might have 2 weeks where everybody can ask questions, and then they post the answers, and then they're going to tell you, I can't discuss the project anymore with you. Okay.
Good. Okay, these are great questions.
They are.
Perfect. Next one. How do you propose an alternate product as opposed to what they have requested for? Example, if they are referencing a TPO roof and we propose a PVC roof in our bid.
You would put that in your project approach or the technical approach, and you would say, we realize that you favor this one product, but in our experience, we found that this product performs at a superior rate and is a little bit cheaper, and that's how you introduce that. But I want to warn you, unless you got something that's really surefire, most of these bids, when they ask for a particular product, they're kind of set on it because they've been using it, they're used to it, and it does what they want. So you're going to have to unseat the incumbent, which means you're going to have some really good numbers and facts in there to get them to consider switching. But it is possible, but that's where you do it, through the project approach or the technical approach.
I would also add in there that a lot of this is a case-by-case basis, depending on what it is that you do and the government is in need of. And so, services are generally one thing, products are generally something else. And so you want to be very, very careful about analyzing the solicitation and understanding what your latitudes are. And if you're not sure, you always ask the question. We have one of our colleagues here, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Vicki, but we do have one of our colleagues here from our Columbus office, and she has a high degree of expertise in bids for DLA. And that's kind of a little different approach if you're bidding products, especially for things for DLA. They're very specific about the specifications, the technical requirements, and what they are interested in purchasing. And so in that particular case, you want to make sure that you're adherent and in compliance with what the solicitation is specifying. They will accept alternate offers. However, that's a completely different submittal process that you go through. And the point of this is not necessarily to dissuade you um, from looking at alternate approaches, but just to understand that there are structured processes and there is a organization to how the government wants to receive those offers, and you want to be in compliant with that, because the government does want the government is constantly emphasizing we want innovation, we want out of the box thinking, we want best practices to be brought to our needs and our solutions. So yeah, alternate offers are welcomed, but you just need to be in compliance with how the government wants to receive those. Vicky, I don't know if you want to chime in on any of that, but feel free.
Oh, I was hoping to just be a fly on the wall. I was going to change my name, but you'd have my picture. This is a great session. Great questions that won't be covered in one day. But the only thing that I can say, your questions are good. You need to read that solicitation, because that solicitation will give you the guidance on how to prepare, and read it and read it again and read it again. The only thing I'd like to kind of interject is on the situation of set-asides. Yes, you need to, again, read that solicitation, but I've been seeing some solicitations that initially call out for a set-aside. That's posted as a set-aside, but within that requirement, they add an additional clause that they're looking for the set-aside first, and if they don't find that, then they'll have another set-aside criteria. So again, it's key to that they could give an award to if that small business, if it's not acceptable. So again, you just got to watch. The government is doing some innovative things to try to accelerate evaluation and delivery. So it's key to look at that solicitation for the details, because it depends. A lot of these questions you're asking, well, it depends. So I'm signing off now.
Well, stand by, because we might tap you in again. And it brings up a really good point, is that this is there's a lot of nuance to this. There's a lot of complexity to it. And so each one of us kind of has a different perspective, a different background and experience, and it's not something that you can learn overnight. It really is something that you have to take we always say it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, right? So be prepared to invest some time and energy in this, and that's your best approach for long-term success.
If I could just jump in one more.
Sure, absolutely. Glad you joined us, by the way.
The Govology learning tool. The Govology, we offer that to our clients, state of Ohio clients, at no cost. They have a suite of webinars that talk about the types of contracts, talk about solicitations. Utilize that Govology learning tool. And within that tool, there's a government marketing fundamentals. Definitely, it would ask your questions. Also, with that said, if you get engaged with that learning tool, when you reach back to your counselor, your Apex counselor, that will help you ask more targeted questions. We are preparing you to do business with the government, so you need to learn the language. And I'm out now. I have a one-on-one at 10. So
okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Vicky. We appreciate it.
Why don't we we'll kind of put the questions off to the side. We're not going to ignore you. We're gonna get to as many questions as we can here for you. But John, maybe you want to kind of proceed forward with the.
I'm pretty sure I want to answer some of those questions as we move forward anyway. So what you're looking at now is this is the path of an RFP for Ohio procurement. You come up to the home page, which used to be Ohio Buys, but the last yesterday when I was putting together some slides, I realized that they've changed it. So now it's Ohio procurement. But this is the home page. You come up here to where it says supplier. it brings you down to the supplier page. And then right here is a nifty little tool that you want. This right here, you can download. It gives you a nice summary of how to be a supplier, what to look for. Then you hit this button here, which launches the public solicitation page, which brings you up here. If you're a registered supplier, you have to have an Ohio ID, and then you can go in through there and get some more details. But the public solicitations are right here for RFPs. And then that, when you click on that, that brings you up to their version of SAM.gov, as I call it, because here is where you're going to enter your keyword search and find opportunities. Now on the next slide, there we go. This is a close-up of what I just showed you. And these little pencils right here, that's what you click on to get your details about the RFP. And then this is the detail page. It gives you a summary what the RFP is about. And then over here on the far right is where you can download the documents for the RFP to your computer so you can read through them and submit. And again, just like Vicky said, you're going to hear this word a lot, read. At the end of the day, you should know that RFP as well as the person who put it together for the city or the government agency that put it out there and be posted. Otherwise, you're going to miss a detail, and that's what the game's about, details. So right there is a blow up, the final page, the solicitation, general information. It's all right here. It's open for bidding. And then right there is all the documents that relate to this RFP. And by the way, when you're going through these RFPs and you're working on one, you are required to make sure that you have all the current information. They'll post it up there as addendums. And if you're lucky, if you're a registered vendor, the system will give you a heads up that the addendum's out there. But if you're not registered with them or you didn't sign the vendors list, you have to go back and check every once in a while to make sure that you're not missing something. It's not their responsibility to keep you informed when they update something. And let's move on. So, congratulations. You spent hours working your way through the various procurement systems to find something, or you use the Apex Accelerator free bid matching service to find something. So you found an RFP that's perfect for your company. Now, at this point, I'm going to walk you through an actual RFP that one of my client companies won last year. It's a geographic information systems RFP. I have a lot of experience in those systems, so very comfortable with it. And I'm going to show you what I did as a business developer to mark this up and get the information out of it that I needed to put together a successful bid. First thing, question is, now what I do? I got it. Now what I do with it? How do I respond? Those are going to be your questions. Can you guess what the very first step is in responding to an RFP? And no, it is not downloading the PDF to your computer. Just want to put that out there. Anybody want to shout out and answer real quick? This is the interactive part.
Just go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like.
Yep.
What was the question again, John?
What is the very first step in responding to an RFP? And it's not downloading it from the website.
Oh,
Read.
Read it.
There you go. Who said that?
Two people, I think, reading it.
Reading. Very good. You got to read it once. You got to read it twice. You got to read it 3 times. I actually recommend rereading it several times before you even sit down with a notepad. Because like I said before, you need to understand this document inside and out. At the end of the day, you will know that RFP as well as the people who put it out there for bid. And it's because you have to take it apart to understand what they're looking for. So the cover page is your first clue as to what's going on. It's going to give you the name of the organization. It might even give you a deadline for submittal, which this one actually does. And then it gives you the location of the project. Now, this is what I did as a business developer. I sat down, I had a range of colored markers. Everything in yellow just caught my eye, like the city of, and I cannot pronounce the city's name, Pascagoula. Don, help me.
That's about right.
First thing I noticed, they're using a GIS software program called Esri. That's a vendor software. So on my right side is what I was writing down in the margins. Literally, I held this in my hands, and the margins, I was writing these notes to myself. They use Esri software. That's a vendor. That's a potential competitor. Or if I'm lucky, Esri isn't interested in something as small, and I can say I have a team that works with it. So my note is vendor software. The next one, GIS program requires ongoing maintenance and upgrades moving forward. That means I have to have skilled GIS staff to do that. This is just coming out of the project scope. And this is only a 6-page solicitation. That's what they put out, was 6 pages of information. The next one's green. I must have someone able to provide technical work and guidance for the city staff that work in the system. So our staff needs to be able to mentor, consult, and provide basic skills and teach them. We're going to insert new subdivisions. The skills required for that: georeferencing, digitizing, scanning, geodatabase build, analysis, construction plan reading. All those skills are required to do that. And then the blue, hey, they're giving me what data they already have that I don't have to collect. That's great. I can build off of that. But that also means I have to perform data management. I have to evaluate the data. I have to maybe clean it up. I have to establish a life cycle. When's it good? When's it bad? And then notice the red line at the bottom. Someday, same day response must be available for any urgent items that come up. That means I have to assign somebody to that city system 24/7. So that gives me about 2 to 3 pages on my technical approach right there. And that's the 1 paragraph project scope, but that's what I'm pulling out of it all. Scope of services. This is what the city is expected from the contractor. And what I do off to the right, again, I'm starting to assign staff. Who do I have that can do this? Do I need to go out and get a subcontractor to do this? This is where you start putting together your team. Provide the required GIS services as needed, directed by the city. Okay, that would be a GIS tech or specialist. Perform services in the office of selected consultant. Again, that's going to be my GIS tech or specialist. Provide services and training. That's different. That's going to be a GIS analyst or manager because they have the experience to teach. Provide technical expertise. Well, expertise takes me up in the next level, GIS analyst or manager. Again, because they've been in the field for a while and they should have the technical knowledge to support the city. And then meet with the city on a regular basis, as well at times requested by city. That's going to be the project manager or the GIS manager who's doubling as a project manager. So I just fulfill my staff position. Then note at the bottom, I'm going to need resumes for each position, each key personnel. And that's how you break down what you start building as your team. Still scope of services, compensation. This is the first hint that I'm going to have to provide a breakdown of services to provide and how much it'll cost the city. But the big red line is, notice that I can't start a project with the city, even if I get if I'm awarded this, we can't be proactive. We have to give the city an estimate of the cost, the schedule, the time frame. It all must be approved prior to starting any project, even after we win the contract, because they have a fixed budget. And any project that we do is going to subtract from that budget. That's why that's in there. Ownership of documents. This is really important, is that when they put this in there, that means that for whatever reason, either the project runs out, the company's terminated, or the city goes in a different direction, all material that was used on the project If the city gave you hardware, if it gave you data plan sheets, must be returned to the city and cannot be used without the city's permission for marketing or for any other project. Sometimes companies like to let interns work on things. No, when they put that in there, you have to have the city's permission to allow that intern to work on that for like a school project. Even though they're a public entity, they still control that. And that's why the ownership of documents is in there. Scope of services still, other requirements. Consultants shall provide the city with assurance of continuing personnel. This means that not only do you have to have one GIS person, you need to have two, because if one gets sick or decides to leave the company, you can't have a 2-week or 3-week time frame where you're searching for candidates to fill the job position. You're not going to be able to train them. Whoever replaces that person that stepped away, that stopped the production, has to be up to speed and at the same level of skill as the person they're replacing. That's the assurance of continuity. So you have to have a backup person in your list of key personnel.
I could
Done?
interject. Yeah, if I could interject something here real quick, John. This is overwhelming. If you've never done this before, this is kind of where everything sort of starts to glaze over.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple points to be made here, and there's a few ways that you can learn this and get started, because this is what your competitors are doing, right? And at a pretty sophisticated level, to John's point, I've got different colored markers. This is how I analyze. This is how I, as they say, shred the RFP, right? Break it down into its constituent elements to generate so how do you learn this, right? Well, there's multiple pathways that successful companies take. You can start off with, smaller solicitations. If the first solicitation you download is 500 pages, and you've never done this before, and it's due Tuesday, you might want to pass on that one and keep looking for some smaller solicitations. So not all of them are as complex as this. So you might want to look at something that is more manageable for you. That's one way to do it, and then work your way up from there. The second way that I've seen, and John, you might have other approaches, but the second way that I've seen small businesses who are new to this get started is teaming, is teaming with front runner successful companies who are priming a contract and being a part of that proposal effort as best you can, to be in the room, to be able to look over somebody's shoulder and contribute to pieces and parts of the proposal. And in the process of doing that, you're learning, right? Not only are you working on business development and hopefully you're aligning yourself on a front running company and you're winning a contract, but you're also learning the proposal process. And then the third way that I've seen is teaming with another small business that has personnel who have some experience on responding to these. I'm sure there's other ways, and John, you probably have seen other ways of doing it, but those are the ones that sort of pop top of mind to me.
No, Don is absolutely right. What I chose to do, because I've received a lot of questions about this, I chose to, in this part of the presentation, show you how I did it, what my thought processes were, so you could learn from that. And that's why the slides are all highlighted, because I know everybody's going to get the slide deck, so you can digest this later. Don's methods work really well. Unfortunately for me, when I got into the game, I was a department of one, and as the only GIS business developer they had. So this is how I did it. And that's why I highlight this. Don's absolutely right. One of the best ways to learn how to do this is partner up as a sub with a prime, and be at the meetings and ask questions. And don't try to One of the things that I know annoyed my bosses at CVE was when they had a small business try to redirect them when they're writing out their proposals. If you're brought on board as a team member, you can make suggestions, but don't be offended if they don't take them. But you're there to learn at that table how to put together a proposal response, especially if you're new to the game. This, I expect you guys to take home, read through it. I just want to show you what you should be looking for in a proposal. How does this relate to my company? How does this relate to what I have? And that goes back to what Don was saying about the market research. You want to pick RFPs that you actually have a shot at going for that match up with your company and where you're going. The shotgun approach, if I want to grab 4 or 5 RFPs and just respond to all of them, isn't going to work. If you're doing technical work, like this is GIS work, so it's technical. Construction work is specific to that. If you got 10 janitorial cleaning RFPs, you might get one of those with the scattergun approach. But generally, it's not going to be that way.
Good.
Thank you, Don.
Mhm.
So this is where in scope of services, all this stuff right here shows you the timeline. And what's really important here, highlighted in red, are where you're going to deliver your submitted response. And you want to note that they actually say they want 1 digital copy. I've seen a lot of people just stop here. Oh, we send it to West Broad Street. They make an envelope and they send it. They're done. Well, no, because they forgot to send the digital copy, the PDF of it. And they tell you down here at the bottom, once again, and this is important. These are deadlines. And this is like a test. If you don't follow through, you're immediately disqualified because they don't want people who are not going to meet deadlines. So it says right here, this invitation, submittals pursuant to this invitation will not be received after the hour and the date stated above, which is 12 p.m. on Friday, December 15th. If your submittal hits them at 12:01, disqualified. Now, this is critical, and that's what I wanted to come to with this. This is very important. We are in format and content now. This is where they're setting the rules of how they are going to accept your submittal and how you're going to write your submittal. So this little paragraph here, you're going to pull out of that. You have a minimum font size of 12. You have a page limit of 15 single-sided pages. And that includes your resume, your project schedules, your table of contents, and cover pages, not the appendices. That's going to be your ace in the hole. And to cover the cost, and that you must have in your proposal a cover letter, a conflict of interest disclosure statement, and all that. If you deviate from any of that they just put down, you're disqualified. Format, content, and submission rules are very important. You want to know these sections very well. The cover letter, they actually tell you what you have to have in your cover letter. And this is not uncommon. They want a brief summary of your qualifications and capabilities. The big thing down here is the signature and contact information that has to be by someone who is authorized to represent the company to negotiate and contractually bind the firm with the city. So that means it's going to be an owner, a company officer, but it's not going to be a project manager. It really is not going to be the business developer. It's going to be an officer of the company. If they're not an officer of the company, when they look at the cover letter, because they're going to have that title, contact information. If it says project manager, disqualified. But the project manager has to be listed on the cover letter of who's going to run the project if the city awards it to the company. All this is critical stuff that and like I said, this is all detail. And that's why you need to keep rereading it. I mean, I wore the paper thin when I was doing this, back and forth. The conflict of interest, that's pretty cut and dry. You don't have to worry too much about that. You just have to tell them if you have business with other municipalities that are nearby, a local land developer, stuff like that. 4.3 is becoming more and more in the field where they're asking, they want to know your litigation history. Do you have any lawsuits out there that they need to know about and that they want to know about, so they evaluate whether or not that lawsuit might represent a liability to the organization. That's why they also want to see the past litigation. Usually they go back 3 years. Yes, Don.
Yeah, just to interject real quick. So, sometimes you lose the forest through the trees, right? So we're asking a lot of questions and having a great discussion. Again, just to emphasize here, what John is doing is he is walking through a typical solicitation, a typical request for proposal, element by element by element of what, when you download one of those big, it could be 40 pages, it could be 100 pages or more, but these are the typical elements that you will encounter, right? And so after you read a few of these, you get kind of good at it. So a lot of times, people like John and myself, we can kind of thumb through sections pretty quickly because we're like, oh, okay, well, there's the qualifications and experience. There's, the terms and conditions. There's the, some of the typical clauses that we read over and over, and you'll get that proficiency as well. And you'll know, okay, these are the sections that I need to pay attention to on my first read, right? Like John said, read it, right? First read, you look at certain sections. The next read, you look at other elements, and the third read, you're probably looking at the whole thing. So again, he's walking you through section by section by section of an example. It's not going to be the same for every solicitation, but every solicitation is going to have kind of the same characteristics. Think of it like reading a book, right? Not every book is the same, but every book has a cover, a table of contents, an index page, it has the same elements. So again, sometimes it's easy to get lost here. So I just want to sort of square us back up again. Over to you, John.
No, that's great, Don. Thank you. So in format and content, you have qualifications and experience. Again, a summary of the company. Now, this is where we talked about this. Your capability statement comes in handy here because we only have 15 pages to work with. Those 15 pages mean you have to have your cover letter, your table of contents, your disclosure of conflict, litigation history, and things like that you're all going to respond back to. So you don't have a lot of room to write out a big paragraph, a big couple pages about what your company can do. So what you do is you give them 1 or 2 paragraphs, say, this is who we are, this is what we can do. Here's a little bit of history. We started in 1985 and to now, and we've had a successful run. See Appendix A, capability statement for more information. And you move on. You just saved yourself at least half a page of your page limit. That's one of the strategies. The next one down is representative projects. They want you to give a project description location. This is, again, capability statement, resume. This is the work history. They want 3 projects that you've done in the last 3 years that match their criteria here. And I don't know how many people came to my presentation about capability statements. I discussed project summary sheets. This is what a project summary sheet is. If you have these in Word, all you do is cut and paste and put them right into your proposal. If you want, you can just print them out and also put them in a hard copy of your proposal. This is the boilerplate. You make these up every time you successfully complete a project, and you have a whole nice library of them ready to go at a moment's notice. This saves you space. Boilerplates save you time. You can also put these in marketing tables when you go to a show to market yourself. Project sheets are very useful. Just again, read the RFP and make sure that your project summary sheet has everything that they're looking for, which would be this list over here, A, B, C, D, like that. If you have everything already on your project sheet, you're good to go. You might have to add it, but then you keep that project sheet because they added something you didn't expect. And this is the thing, resumes. Okay. We talked about this. You're going to need a 1-page or resume or biography for each of the proposed key personnel working on the project. So if you have 3 or 4 people working on the project, that's 3 or 4 pages that you're going to subtract from your available pages for your technical approach. But this is for key personnel. So this would be your project manager. This would be the liaison between the city and the project, and who's ever going to supervise the workers under the project manager would be that type of personnel. Finally, we get to project approach. They're going to say, provide a detailed description of how you're going to complete the project. Here's what you got to remember in your notes. You have a page limitation. You don't want to get too technical because that sounds like you're trying to talk over the head and forward. So you need to be able to kind of distill it down to, if you're technical, like the GIS world, you got to distill it down to where anybody who's not doing that kind of work can understand it. But you still need to come across as competent, so you don't want to be talking under them either. It's kind of tricky. It takes some practice to get to that. It really does. You want to talk about how you're going to demonstrate how to solve the city problem. And here's the key thing. You don't want to give away proprietary information that's good for your company that your competition doesn't know about, because the people who don't get this project will download everybody's proposal and read through and see where they might be able to improve themselves. Because they can request that information from the city. It's when you go for this and it's a government agency, this becomes public domain. You got to keep that in mind. Costs. You have to give them a 1-page breakdown of what's going to cost with a total at the bottom of the page. You're going to break down each service, give it a cost, relate it to section 2.1, make sure you got everything done. And at the bottom of the page, provide this is the total for all these services. And they can look down the chart and see what they got. Don't worry, we're almost done going through this, by the way. I picked a small one. So now we're at the consultant selection evaluation. This is where they're telling you how they're going to select the winning project or winning bid. What you want to do is you want to thumb through back here, to steal a phrase from Don, and read through the RFP again. Read your draft submission now. You're going to be reading your draft submission as much as you're reading the RFP, because now you want to come back here and make sure you've covered A through G in your RFP. Sometimes they sneak 1 or 2 little things in here that they haven't quite put in the scope of services or the project scope. They come down here because someone, oh yeah, we'll just put it there, and they forget that they might have wanted to stick it up there so you can find some more information here. So did you follow the formatting instructions? And this is what they're going to do. The people reading these, they're going to sit down here with this. Did this person follow format instructions? Yes or no? If it's a no, they're going to put them off to one side. Conflicts of interest? Yes or no? Experience. And there's going to be a checkpoint. A lot of times they do a point system to where all this equals 100. And whoever comes closest to 100 might win the project. But this is the list you want to double check your submission against. Then you get to the general terms and conditions. And this is to protect you, the vendor, and the municipality or the organization. This sets out the terms that protect the organization from anybody expecting to get the project just because they submitted. That doesn't happen. And then the next paragraph talks about you bear the cost for submitting. Right here. they're going to talk about awarding the contract. And notice one thing that the city does is it reserves the right to accept or reject any or all submittal, to alter the selection process in any way, or to postpone the selection process for its own convenience at any time for any reason whatsoever, and to waive any defects, or to issue a new RFP. This whole thing right here is just to simply protect them from a lawsuit if they choose to deep six the project, or they can't fund the project, or they realize that they made a mistake and pull everything back. So how do you plan your response? You read. I can't emphasize that enough. You make a list of what your submission will need to address. That's my note column. And then you backcast. You start from the point of finished and work your way backwards. So in this case, the RFP has a 15-page limit. I put a cover page out. I put a cost proposal out. A 3-project reference. 1 conflict of interest. I'm going to try and use 5 pages to cover my company quals, project manager resume, the GIS tech resume, and the GIS analysis resume. That gives me 5 pages for my technical approach. Can anybody spot the 1 page I didn't put in there? And this is why you have to keep rereading stuff. And I did this deliberately just to see if anybody might catch it. Don, can you catch it?
Is there a prize involved?
I'll buy you a beer.
No, I can't.
Okay. And this is why sometimes you need to take a break. And this is why you want to get these things as soon as possible, because when you're doing all this, you want another set of eyes, at least one more set of eyes. Usually we had a team of 2 or 3 people after a while at CVE doing this. You want to take breaks. You get halfway through reading, you take a break, get up, go to the bathroom, walk around the building, take a lunch, because your eyes will get tired. What I didn't put in here, it would trip me up, is I didn't put a table of contents in my list of pages. It's a 15-page document. They want to be able to flip through and find the page that they want to reference. They can't do that without a table of contents. So right there, my calculations would be off. I'd be 1 page short. And then again, if you have a team of contributors working on this, everybody must follow the specifications set forth in the format section. Any deviation will result in disqualification. I have seen people, we went for a big project with the Boston Port Authority for the airport, and we were limited in the technical approach to 6 pages for the GIS work. And we were all allowed to witness them evaluating the bid proposals. So we weren't allowed to ask any questions, make any comments, but we were all sitting around this conference table. Well, this conference table was in the center of the room with 9 people evaluating everything. And I learned a lot from this. And I saw all of them start laughing at the same time. And they held up to the room and said, we're not going to mention any names, but this one's getting disqualified, because what the people had done was, we were told you could not go below 11-point type. They were trying to squeeze so much information in there that they not only went below 11-point type, they went to 8-point type, and they tried to go squish it in by reducing the spacing between lines to almost less than I think they tried to trick of using 6-point. So it just looked like a massive concentration of text. Immediate disqualification. You didn't follow the formatting for the text. Just because they're trying to squeeze a couple extra pages into that one section. And finally, when you submit the bid, make sure you're following the submission guidelines. Make sure you're getting it there on time. And that's basically how you respond to an RFP, how you pick it apart, and how you take a look at it. Now, one of the things I will say is boilerplates is a good tip. You know, when you get a well-written boilerplate of a paragraph or 2, save it. If you have a boilerplate for a page, save it, because it makes your life a lot easier as you're building up a library to just reach back and grab this. And then you can just customize the technical approach or the project approach, and it will cut down on your time spent doing this. And that pretty much concludes the presentation for today. Now we're
So-
open up to Q&A.
Yeah, so I've got a question. We've got some great questions teed up here, but I've got a question for you real quick, John. So for that solicitation that you went through,
Right.
Ballpark, just ballpark, how many hours would it take you to respond to that? And how many people would be involved in pulling together your proposal for an RFP like that?
Well, that was an RFP one of my client companies brought to me, and they won the contract. I helped them kind of refine their response. But for me, just myself, the first pass through that RFP to pull things out to highlight to everybody, it took me about 4 hours on a 6-page proposal, 6-page RFP.
And pulling together the entire proposal, right? From the time that you access the solicitation to the time that you put the table of contents in the front of the proposal. How much time, ballpark?
I would say it would take a minimum of 3 days to respond to that after I had, but again, that's when I had all my library set up. When I first started, you're looking at a week. Because remember, they're giving me a 6-page RFP, but they expect me to respond with 15 pages. And within that 15 pages, I have to fit everything that's going to make us successful in winning that contract. And that's where the other tip I have is using the appendices can help you out. Put your capabilities statement there, put any additional information that you feel is necessary to the project there, but don't overdo it. If they say we want 15 pages and you give them 8 pages of appendices, you're technically not disqualified, but I can guarantee you you're not the top tier candidates for the job.
Okay, so we'll get to the questions here. We had a whole block of kind of questions about what Vicky had mentioned, the Govology
Right.
subscription that we have. If that's something that you're interested in, reach out to your local Apex Accelerator. I know we have a few people, more than a few people today who are from outside the state of Ohio. So if that is you, reach out to your local Apex, and I'll put a link here in the chat so that you can connect with your local Apex, and they will have their own code and access to that, and they may have subscriptions to other services as well. So but reach out to your local Ohio Apex if you're located here in the state of Ohio, and they'll get you all the information that you need to get connected there. So let's see here. We did have a question sort of scrolled up on me here for a second. Okay. Will RFPs typically involve safety certification and training requirements related to performing on the contract?
It depends on that's a case-by-case basis. If they want to specify that you have to have them, they'll be in the RFP. That's strictly case to case as to who puts it out and what they want.
Okay. Okay. What is the difference between sources sought, combined synopsis solicitation, and solicitation in SAM?
What was the last one they're done?
What is the difference between sources sought, combined synopsis solicitation, and solicitation in SAM?
Well, sources size when they're putting out, they're looking for potential. Basically, they're kind of building a vendors list, and they want to see how you would approach the project. I mean, I've seen a couple of different variations that. Don, you might have a little different variation of it. Essentially, at the end of the day, they kind of want an idea of who's out there that can do the work and how they would do the work. Not necessarily that they're putting a project out. There might be a project coming down the pipeline in the future, but they're just kind of testing the waters to see who might respond to it.
They're also using sources sought. You know, this it's an absolutely fantastic question. This could be a whole workshop
It could be.
in of itself. So we'll try and give you a quick answer, but you know, the proper way to address this is probably through a discussion with your Apex Accelerator, but just kind of hitting the highlights. Sources sought, very important to respond to. Typically that's the government doing their market research, and the government is not haphazard about how they buy what they need. Very organized. There's yearly budgets. They know, they have a pretty good idea of what their requirements are going to be. So that acquisition activity, the acquisition cycle, is rolling long before the solicitation itself is posted. And what they're doing is they're doing their market research. So great example is, how do they make the determination of deciding to set aside an opportunity, right? If the government is contemplating, we'd like to set this aside for small business, woman-owned small business, veteran-owned, service disabled, veteran-owned small business, hub zone, possibly in 8A. How do they make that determination? Well, they typically will post the sources sought. And in that sources sought, they're soliciting, right, information from industry. Are you interested in bidding on this? And do you have the capability and capacity to support this requirement? If you do, and you have an interest in bidding on it, we'd like to know more about your business. And they're typically looking for justification for setting that aside for one of the preferred small business certifications: woman-owned, veteran-owned, hub zone, so on. And so responding to those sources sought notices is a good thing. It should be something, if you have the interest in responding, you can help the government by providing information about your company, and hopefully, they make the determination to set that aside for a business of your type, right? So that's a sources sought. The other combined synopsis solicitation, there's also a designation in SAM for bundled requirement solicitations. Those are, without getting into the weeds on this, those are basically all different forms of RFPs. They're different ways that the government is posting that opportunity, but essentially it is all taking the form of an active acquisition, right? The government is saying, here, we've gone through the sources sought, we've done our market research, now we're posting the procurement and saying, here it is, here's the solicitation, which John just walked you through. So again, that's at a very, very high level. We could go on and on. Okay. That's a good question. Hey, these are great questions.
These are really good questions.
You guys are on it. What do they mean by firm fixed price? If it's a multi-year contract, does that mean that the price cannot change over the length of the contract if costs change?
You want me to take that one first, Don, or you want to take it first?
Either way.
The contracts I have seen and I've been a part of with firm fixed price is the basic price of the contract. And usually, if you're doing something like this, like I had a contract, Save Oberlin, where DRG was paid, basically given a budget of $45,000 a year to support the GIS work in the city. That was the fixed price. Now, when you're working something like this, there's going to be a little bit of negotiation before the paperwork's signed. And that's where you want to bring up the question about, do we get an increase for like cost of inflation, cost of living? that can be added to it. And that would be part of the fixed price. But that also means that if you run over the contract price and say you do $55,000 worth of work, the city might allow you to have a change order to cover that, or they might simply say, no, we said firm fixed price, and that's it. And that's pretty much how it works. Now, Don, you got some other contracts that you might be working a little bit differently, but that's pretty much the basics.
No, I think you hit it well. It really is a case by case basis that it depends on, it depends on services or products. It depends on the length of the contract. Again, that's one of those subject areas that you don't want to try to sort of be under the gun, and the proposal is due in the next couple of weeks and you've never addressed these kind of issues. And that's where I think we come in, and again, in that rehearsal style practice format of, let's take a look at a typical solicitation. Let's go through it a lot like John did, right? In item by item, step by step of a solicitation that's typical for you, and do that kind of analysis and understand the nuances of a firm fixed price contract in your in your industry, in your market area, right? So that can really, if you're providing transportation services and the price of fuel and for your vehicles, that could be a really, really important consideration over a 5-year contract. So you want to make sure that you're understanding how to price and what latitudes are built into the contract. So yeah,
I want to interject one other point here. I'm glad they brought this up. Is one trick a lot of people have been trying to use, and it's being stepped on. It happens a lot in construction and engineering firms and engineering services and construction service for the city. It's called change of order. And what happens is that's a request for the city to cover an expense that wasn't expected or was not in the proposal. And what people were doing, it became a bad habit, was they were deliberately underbidding the cost of the contract to win it. And then they come back and they do a series of change orders or requests for the city to cover these extra expenses that they didn't cover with their RFP proposal. And the cities used to go along with it, but once the market went down in 2008, once the tax dollars dried up, and then COVID came along much later, the cities really do not like to see that. And 9 times right now, if like in my world, in the GIS world, if I did that to the city, they said, no, you should have put that in the contract and told us up front, we're not going to do a change order. So you don't want to depend on change orders to make up the difference if you underbid or undervalue your services to the city. They won't necessarily cover it because they don't have to. And I'm glad someone brought up the firm fixed price, because it plays right into that. That was one of the tactics to get around that.
very risky way to go. Good point. Question, what is DLA? DLA is the Defense Logistics Agency. Typically, the purchases that are characteristic of the Defense Logistics Agency are typically products. Not all of them, but typically that's kind of how it goes. I've put a link in the chat for just some basic overview information for DLA. But if that's something that you're interested in knowing more about, I would say, bring that up as a topic of conversation with your Apex Accelerator. I recently submitted a proposal through I think this is information portal. Should I expect a notification that my proposal was received? How should I approach the office to determine status of my proposal? I've heard nothing. Good question.
That is, well, first of all, they should have sent you if they're having you upload it through an information portal, they should have sent you a email receipt that it was received. Again, this is one of those case by case basis. Is sometimes you put a submittal in, and the only way that you know that was received is if you do the physical copy, you send it by registered mail, and they have to sign for it. That's what I always did. A digital copy with Outlook, you can say they have to basically give you a receipt that says, yes, we received it. There's that little box that pops up. Those are the two best ways to protect yourself, because it's on you to make sure that they got it. Now, generally, most of the time, I've never had a problem getting the receipt back or picking up a phone call saying, hey, I'm just checking, did you receive my proposal, or an email? And that's allowed. You're not asking any questions, you're just asking that they got it. As long as you're before deadline, they will say yes or no. If it's after deadline, they're going to say, don't bother, because you can't submit it anyways. So this brings us back to Don's point. You don't want to learn how to do this at the last minute and rush it through, because you might miss that submittal point. Because sometimes if they've disqualified you, they're just quiet. But again, it's a case by case basis. 9 times out of 10, you'll have no trouble finding out that if you've been accepted or made it there. So my recommendation to you, if you have not heard from anybody through the information portal, just simply shoot them an email and say, hey, I submitted this on this date at this time through your portal. Was it received? And they should come back with an answer for you, because you're not violating any of the parameters about asking questions.
Good. Okay, next question. Can I find an RFP that I may have heard about that I know that someone I know is bidding on? Can I find an RFP? Sorry, it's your writing is fine. It's my reading that's the problem. Can I find an RFP that I may have heard about that someone I know is bidding on? If so, how do I find where that RFP is? I'm gonna carve that apart in 2 parts, John, before you answer it. I think the first part is, where do I find the solicitation? But I think there's also built in here is, can I find the proposal? So maybe you want to address both of those.
Actually, I did this once. I succeeded in kind of coming in from the backside and stealing a project. First of all, if you heard of somebody working on proposing or responding to an RFP, the best place to go to get the RFP that they're working on is the source. So if you've heard through the grapevine that Don Z is responding to an RFP for the city of Cleveland, and you know that you've heard about it, you know it's coming out, you can go to the city of Cleveland, get a copy of it, and go ahead and put your own submission in. Now, to get a peek at his proposal, unless you hack his computer or you're sitting at his desk, you're not going to be able to do that, because the proposals, when they're submitted, they're confidential. And they're not going to share that information with anybody who wants to see it until after the bidding process is completed. Does that answer the question?
I believe it does. It's and just to emphasize, for yourself as a small business owner, you should protect that information, keep it very closely held. Be very, very careful about sharing your proposals with anyone outside of your organization. In fact, many subcontractors will actually submit their portion of their proposal under a completely separate cover that the primes don't even see. I mean, it's that closely held information. So be very careful. You put a week, you put 2 weeks, you put 3 weeks of time into developing a proposal. That's proprietary, confidential information that you want to protect yourself. So hold it tight.
One thing I want to point out here is ethically, if people learn that you're kind of sharpshooting on these RFPs that they might have mentioned to you, then you all of a sudden you go out after them and you manage to hijack one or two from people, you're going to get a bad reputation because people are going to stop talking to you about potential work because they're looking at you as a subcontractor, and all of a sudden you go out and go for it as a prime and you win it. They're not going to be too happy about that. And that reputation will stick with you for quite a while. So be careful if you decide to go after something because you heard somebody else is on it, or they talk to you about it, about possibly you coming on board as a sub. So you always want to keep that in the back of your mind. You might get the contract, you might get that one, but the intangible ramifications of picking up a bad mark against your reputation could hurt you down the road.
Okay, good. Next question. This has to do with personnel. Okay, proposed personnel. So can one person qualify for multiple positions? For example, can a safety manager also be the site superintendent?
In that specific instance, my answer would be a no, because from my time in construction battalions, your safety person has to be independent because they're going to flag any safety violations or potential safety violations to protect the workers and you from OSHA violations. So in that regard, no, I would not recommend a site superintendent and a safety officer be combined. However, what you can do is, because in small business world, we all wear multiple hats. What you can do is say, my project manager, the project manager / liaison will be the one that runs a project at the same time fulfills the liaison role to the city. That's good. If you have someone who is qualified to handle two different job categories based on the resume, yes, you can double them up. You can say this person will handle job A and job B, and here is his credentials to do that in his resume, and call him out as a special asset. Say, we have a special asset that will save you money because we can do two roles at one time because he has that, and then throw that resume in there. If he's got certifications, back him up with that. So you can do it, but you have to be careful how you do it and which positions you combine. For example, reaching back to my GIS day or my construction days, I couldn't say this guy's an electrician and he's also going to run the bulldozer. Two entirely different job categories. They're never going to buy something like that. But if they're electrician and they got computer work, they could set up the server farm. They could be the system administrator. That'd be fine. That'd actually be a bonus because they wouldn't have to have the certified electrician come out and set certain things up. He could do it for them as he sets up the server farm. That would work.
Great. Very good. We've got a couple of great questions here. I'll make sure we get to these. So where can I find a mentor protege? When I applied for the program, they asked that we find our own mentor. Can you give me some great suggestions?
A mentor protege for
So I think the
business?
question is, where can I find a mentor company, right? So if I'm a small
Okay.
business, I want to be the protege. Where can I find a mentor company? Where do I go?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's a great question. And Don probably has a couple answers for me too, but my first response would be put yourself out there as a subcontractor and work with them like that. And that would be a mentor. If you know someone who's in your field who has more experience than you and who is friendly to working with new people, reach out to them, say, hey, I'm new to this. I'd like to learn. And I think the SBA has a mentor program.
Yeah, and you know that they have the program, but they're not a matchmaker. They're not gonna go and research mentor companies for you and provide a list. However, there's no one solid answer to this. It depends on your business. John's absolutely right. Start off as a subcontractor. That's usually a good way to start. So how do you find a mentor company? Couple different ways. One, I would start with, for example, in the federal sector, I would start with USA spending. All right, I would research awarded contracts that are in your market sector and look at who's currently being awarded work. You want a team with a front runner company, right? You want to have a relationship with a company that's winning. And so using a site like USA Spending is a good place to start. There's also another site on the federal sector called the SBA DSBS, or Dynamic Small Business Search. That's another good way to identify potential companies as well. SAM.gov, under contract opportunities, there's a selection for looking at contracts that have been awarded. And again, that's a great way to identify companies who are successful as primes. So that's a good place to start with a list. The next aspect of that question is, well, how do I get them interested in me as being a protege organization that they want to enter into a formal agreement with? And that's kind of a different discussion. They're looking for competitive advantage. They're looking for business development issues. Typically, how can you help my competitive position, things of that nature. So that's kind of a different discussion. I would say it would be a good discussion to have with your Apex accelerator. Monique, is there anything you want to add to that in terms of your question?
No, you did good.
Okay.
Don, I just thought of one other resource for them with that.
Thanks.
Would be, a lot of the colleges have the Launchpad business incubators, and business incubators run by cities. Local governments would be a potential place to help find a mentor.
And you want to be very selective about that. You are only afforded 2 mentor protege relationships in the life of your business. Okay. So it's not something that you just sort of jump into and say, okay, let's go. So you want to be very careful that you maximize that program for yourself and your business. And so it's typically kind of a phase 2 idea after you get your feet wet a little bit in government contracting. Usually a mentor protege agreement is kind of a second stage idea. Okay, this is a good one. Short question. Would you use AI to assist?
No, I would not recommend using AI to assist, because AI pulls from a lot of different sources, and it will not, first of all, will not reflect what you should put down there. If you're having trouble writing something, I would use, well, Grammarly is a form of AI, but that helps with punctuation and sentence structure. I would not use AI to build content, like how to do a technical approach. That should be your company's skill set, your methodology. If you use an AI, it's going to go for the most common denominator methodology, which will not make you stand out in front of your competition. So that's my recommendation, is to put it simply, use AI for editing, sentence structure, grammar, punctuation. Do not use AI for technical approaches or project approach. Don, over to you.
I'd agree with that as well. Yeah, that's especially on some of the public AI applications that are available. That information becomes public. That information goes into those systems, and we talk about holding this information very close and making sure that's not floating out there for your competitors to have access to. So just in of itself, that's something to be careful of. Yeah, this is you know, this is definitely something that you want to you want to craft yourself. It's a contract. I mean, you can see from what John went through, this is a contract between your business and a government agency, whether that's the federal government, the Department of Defense, state agencies, local city departments. It's a contract, and to trust that to you know, artificial intelligence, I can't recommend that as a business recommendation. So yeah. Let's see here. I think that's about it.
And I just got a little thing about one new message. What's that one? Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, I'll just from my end, thanks everybody for taking the time. You know, we are Friday here before the Memorial Day weekend, and I did just want to just comment, you know, take some time on Monday to reflect on that holiday and think about that a little bit. You know, what John and I do, we're very, very proud and privileged to help businesses, small businesses like yourselves, do and support government agencies. This is something more than just profit. There's an aspect of this to serving your community, serving our nation, and you know, our government doesn't function without small businesses and companies like yourself. So we appreciate you taking the time to spend your morning with us. We hopefully gave you some great information. This is just meant to be a starting point. This is not meant to give you all the answers for RFPs, but to energize your discussion with your Apex Accelerator. So take this information. Hopefully you can engage in a deeper conversation with your Apex Accelerator. But you know, again, I just want to emphasize, take a few minutes on Monday to reflect on why service to the country is important, and recognizing veterans and their support of our nation. Very, very important. So enough said. I will turn it over to the veteran to wrap it up. John, you were in the Navy.
I was a Navy Seabee.
Yeah.
So I want to thank everybody for coming and joining us. We were really surprised and very pleased with the response that this presentation received. I mean, we were receiving new registrations for this right up until late last night. And we enjoy helping people. Like Don said, this is a starting point. I know that I did a technical thing on you guys and ran you through a deep dive into how to respond to an RFP, but I couldn't think of any other way to get the point across that this is what you have to do to respond to an RFP. I can sit here and we can have a high level discussion, but until you get in the weeds and see how you pull information out, it kind of, it's hard for me to describe what needs to be done. So I apologize if I put anybody to sleep, or if anybody thought I was going over their head, or I was being boring, but that's the life of a guy working on an RFP. And I wanted you to see it. And you should be thankful I picked one of the small ones. I've worked with them at 60 pages. It's literally like reading a handbook to a lawnmower, which is about as dry as you can get. But again, thank you. And I hope everybody has a safe, happy weekend. And remember those we've lost. And I'm going to try and end the recording here. See if I can get this to work. Reset the default whiteboard breakout rooms. I don't want that. There's stop recording.